The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Often considered one of the best, most influential games ever made, Ocarina of Time happens to be one of the first I ever owned, and gets a lot of credit for opening my mind to the wonder and creativity of video games. I'm impressed at just how well this game's held up over time, considering how early it was for a 3D title. But as beloved as it still is to this day, it's of course not without its rough spots. You'll mostly hear complaints about the water temple or awkward camera controls, but I never found these problematic. I have my own personal selection of weaknesses. In this video, I'm going to lay out what I found to be the best and the worst aspects of this game. Be warned that full spoilers for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time are on the table. The best. Number 1, the world. One of the Zelda series' greatest strengths is offering large, varied worlds to explore, and as the first attempt of this in 3D, man is it well done. While a lot of these areas are typical locations for video games, they're executed very well, with interesting characters and things to discover. Towns are active, and the more secluded areas feel hidden. You're constantly rewarded for looking around. Side quests are integrated organically, and are thankfully almost always worth your time, the trading sequence and mask-selling quests being the standouts. These characters are so quirky they leave a lasting impression, and lend a lot to Ocarina's charm. The various races are all interesting and feel original. There's a magical feeling to just existing in this world. Hyrule Field is a little empty considering the size, but its presence creates a scale to Hyrule that would be missing without it. This is a fantastic realization of this kingdom in 3D, one that's easy to get attached to. Number 2, atmosphere and music. Atmosphere is a crucial element for a world to feel believable. A substantial amount of mood has been given to these environments, thanks to distinct visual design and graphical effects. Cutscenes are well directed, and express a surprising amount of emotion considering the lack of voice work and polygonal models. Each location nails what it's going for, and sound design deserves a lot of credit for how much it adds to the immersion. The Chamber of Sages, Lost Woods, Lon Lon Ranch, Kakariko Graveyard, you feel placed in these environments. Tying it all up is an exceptional soundtrack. These tracks perfectly fit their environments, lending them a lot of identity, with some of the most iconic pieces in the series. All of these elements combine beautifully, making it effortless to get absorbed in this world. Number 3, dungeons. Ocarina of Time has some of the best dungeons the series has seen. Cool set pieces with well-crafted layouts, themes, and puzzles. Some are linear, while others are more sprawling, requiring thorough exploration. They're all paced well and never overstay their welcome. Well, unless you're having a hard time. The temples, as an adult, are the real standouts. While these might vary in how fun they can be to play through, they're all great challenges themed around their elements. The forest and spirit temples are my favorites. I'll admit that the water temple is the clunkiest of the 5, due to an abstract layout, time-consuming puzzles, and constant menu use. Still, the dungeons are the biggest highlight of the Ocarina of Time experience, and they wouldn't be complete without, number 4, boss fights. This is how you craft thrilling boss fights, some of the best the series has seen. While not very challenging, they're so impressively animated they feel intimidating. Fights are tense and energized, and a great payoff to the challenges leading up to them. Look at these concepts. A parasite controlling jellyfish and discharging electricity. A phantom riding a horse through paintings. A one-eyed shadow beast that's one of the most original monster designs I've ever seen. These are incredibly cool creatures, and while a lot of them are pushovers when you know what you're doing, they're still satisfying to defeat. Shout out to the arenas themselves, which are well considered to ensure each one's memorable. Twinrova's probably my favorite, with a fun strategy of reflecting her own elemental attacks back at her. Again, it's not especially challenging, but well directed and leaves an impact. Mini-bosses are far less impressive. Most are actually pretty annoying, but one or two are solid fights. Number 5, the final sequence. In my experience, endings are hard to land, so while Ocarina of Time isn't surprising or involved, it deserves credit for how well executed it is. Organ music plays as you ascend the tower to confront Ganondorf, setting the scene and building suspense. The battle's unfortunately a bit one-note, but directed so well it feels grandiose. After he's taken down, the tension doesn't let up, with an escape sequence through the crumbling castle and moment of unease when all goes quiet. The reveal of Ganon's twisted final form rising from the wreckage is insanely cool, and the perfect capstone to a game of this scale. Taking away the Master Sword is a great way to put you on edge for an intimidating final battle. That's actually really easy, but getting it back helps you feel empowered and ready to finish the fight. The ending credit scenes are also really rewarding, showing the places and characters you've met along the way, celebrating your achievements. It's a satisfying ending, topping off a fulfilling adventure. It's easy to gush about this game, and I don't think it's hard to see why. Ocarina of Time still stands tall today, but considering this was such a big step forward for the franchise at a time when 3D development was still being figured out, it's no surprise that some qualities haven't aged very well. The worst, number 1, cryptic progression. Games are often handholdy, and fail to let players figure things out themselves. Ocarina of Time does a great job letting you play it at your own pace, which is great, but too often progression is obscure or unclear. Several times throughout the game, you won't know where to go or what to do next, and solutions can feel random and poorly conveyed. For example, when you first become an adult, you're told to go to Kakariko Village, but unless you talk to 1 or 2 inconspicuous NPCs, you won't know that you're actually supposed to go to the graveyard to move a specific gravestone and beat the ghost in a race to earn a necessary key item. NPC dialogue often leads to side quests and other random things, so to distinguish this information and this gravekeeper race as the main path of progression, and not just some minigame to get a heart piece, is a good example of what I mean, and several moments are like this. Progression isn't always organic, and ideally, guiding the player would feel more natural. Number 2, item utility. Obtaining new items is exciting, but when you break a lot of these down, they lack utility. Most of them really just act like keys to open the path forward. Only a few have functionality beyond that, and even then, a lot of them do similar things. The bow, slingshot, hookshot, and boomerang have a lot of overlap, with only a few differences, and there's no good reason adult Link shouldn't be able to use everything young Link can. It's an excuse to limit progression when you become an adult. The Megaton Hammer is barely used for combat, and primarily for activating switches. The 3 magic spells are cute ideas, but ultimately not very useful. The elemental arrows are disappointing with very little functionality. The tunics and boots do their job, but opening the menu whenever you have to switch to them is a hassle, and makes you not want to bother with them at all. Zelda's Lullaby is treated as a puzzle early on, but is randomly required throughout the rest of the game, and feels placed just to take up time and have something for you to do. A lot of these items are less useful than they appear, offering little when it comes to combat or mobility. It's a bloated selection, leading to constantly having to go in and out of the menu to equip things, dragging the experience down with interruptions. Number 3, aiming. This first-person aiming feels pretty bad. Considering how many challenges require fast-paced accuracy, it won't take long until you're cursing out the sensitivity. You have to push the analog stick quite a bit for the reticle to move at all, but it moves so quickly that it often goes past its target, so you have to move it back the other way, often passing the target again. It feels very digital. You end up having to jut the stick back and forth until finally centering on what you're trying to hit, but this process feels awful to work with, and notably unpolished. It's a nightmare in some of the more demanding minigames, or when you want to get a shot off quickly, like when hunting Pose on horseback. Speaking of, number 4, riding Epona. Epona, your horse companion, isn't very fun to use, with awkward controls and behavior. She'll pause, neigh, and back up for every little thing, so most of the time she's more trouble than she's worth. God forbid you get close to anything while riding her. She'll also get frustrated if you stop quickly from a gallop, and yeah, I guess that could be realistic, but diminishes the whole convenience factor she's supposed to provide. Luckily, she's not required for much. If anything, she seems included for the novelty of riding a horse, which is fine, but if she was smoother and less fussy, she'd be a lot more enjoyable to use. Number 5, useless rupees. A common thing for a lot of Zelda games, it's easy to be overflowing with rupees. Why is that a bad thing? Because tons of rupees you find will be wasted since you're already maxed out. The real problem though is that there's barely anything worth using them on. Most of them will end up going to magic beans, which do cost a fair amount, but beyond that, they're really only used for the occasional minigame. There's just so little to buy in this game. Shops sell a bunch of overpriced junk you can find in any old grass patch. Even completing the Skulltula side quest, by far the most demanding thing in the game, only rewards you with endless amounts of rupees, which couldn't be more useless at the end of the game. It's a shame because they're a satisfying currency to collect, but when there's not a lot of worthwhile things to buy with them, they're not very rewarding. And that actually covers it. Regardless of these issues, Ocarina of Time's incredible ambition is still apparent today. A lot of titles from this time suffer from the growing pains of 3D game design, and because of that, many aren't worth playing now. But Ocarina of Time is remarkable in this regard. It's still a blast to play and one of the best entries in the Zelda series. This is an engaging, timeless classic that will always hold a special place in my heart. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked my video, subscribe and check out my Patreon. Thank you so much to my patrons for your support. I'll see you next time.